advertising today is 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 admittedly advertising today is advertising today is advertising today is
Today, Junior?
okay. So if we're gonna create a better understanding of advertising, we have to begin at the beginning. What is an ad and what is advertising? Advertising in its basic form is the pairing of a product that wants to be sold or a brand that wants to increase its notoriety with an audience. Importantly, an ad is kind of separated from a lot of other content in the sense that the ad is not the thing that people came for, right? People don't go to a channel to watch ads. They go to a channel to watch something, and then the ads are some addendum on top of it. Now, granted, it's not all film media. So we could be talking about a magazine, right? You don't buy Popular Mechanics in order to get ads for Porsche strewn throughout it. You don't drive down the highway looking for billboards to figure out what you're going to purchase next or how far away the next casino is. So advertising is kind of this marriage of product and audience at its most basic level. Within the realm of advertising, there are two main levers that someone can pull in order to modulate advertising. One of them is what's called reach, how many eyeballs you're getting. Maybe the easiest example of this is, are you buying an advertisement during the Super Bowl that millions of people are going to see, or are you buying an ad on local public television, right? That's you modifying reach, and reach usually comes at a cost. The second lever is targeting, and targeting is a way to pare down your audience only to people that are more likely to desire your product in a play for efficiency. You can reduce cost because you're reaching a smaller audience. So the core of advertising is really largely advertisers pulling and manipulating those two levers to try and get the desired result. And for them, the desired result is always either more awareness about their brand, that's called brand advertising, or more sales, which is called performance advertising. For the purposes of our discussion, I don't think reach is super interesting, right? This is basically just how many eyeballs are available to you, and it's usually just more eyeballs, more money. There are some exceptions, but most of those exceptions happen because of the way that targeting works, and we'll talk about that next. So let's talk about targeting. The way that I think about it, there are three main types of targeting, and each of them has its own characteristics and lends itself to different mediums. The first form of targeting, and the one that Google's business, as an example, hinges on most, is intent-based targeting. If someone says, I'm looking for a toaster oven, and you can show them an ad for a toaster oven company, you have matched the intent that they stated with an advertisement. And in a perfect world, that works out beautifully. The person gets the toaster oven they want, the advertiser gets to sell them that toaster, and Google gets a cut of the profits in the middle because they brokered the eyeballs reaching the appropriate ad. So intent-based advertising is perhaps the least interesting. The next two forms of advertising, I think, they go hand in hand, and I think that they are a bit more interesting to talk about. The first one is what I'll call context-based advertising. In context-based advertising, you know what the person is looking at, and you know if your product aligns with the thing that they're looking at. To go back to the previous example of Popular Mechanics magazine, there's certain inferences that you can make about the people who read Popular Mechanics magazine, and it may or may not be a safe bet to assume that they might be interested in cars. So that's context-based advertising, and the same goes for a billboard, right? You might assume that commuters driving by a billboard are more likely to work in the city or live in the suburbs or something like that. Then again, with web pages, if you know that this is a tech blog or a knitting blog, then you have a good suspicion that the person going to that blog is going to be interested in certain things, and so you can target your advertisements. That reduces the overall scope, right? You're getting less eyeballs, but you have a much higher chance of converting on those eyeballs and making a sale to the people that are looking at the ad. The final form of targeting that I want to talk about is audience-based targeting. And it's very similar to context-based, except rather than making inferences about the people that are reading a particular publication or looking at a particular billboard, you actually, as the broker of the advertisement, know who the person is or know information about the person, and as a result can target them. And this is the essence of so much of the advertising that we see today. I think the most, we'll call it infamous example of this is Facebook, right? Facebook, through a whole host of different data provided by its users, has the ability to refine a very specific model of a person and what they like. So we can look at a particular person and be like, this person is a car enthusiast, this person is a knitting enthusiast, and then Facebook can target ads to those people based on which audiences they belong to. This is kind of the heart of a lot of the tech big data that's going on in the advertising space right now. When you think about these large companies like Facebook, Snapchat, Pinterest, Google, you think of companies that are building models of their audiences based on the habits and actions of those audiences, and those are enabling them to be able to target ads to those people when no specific intent has been stated, right? The person didn't say that they needed a toaster oven, but based on the fact that you know certain things about them, maybe how many kids they have, where they live, what kinds of food they like for breakfast, you might know that they really need a toaster oven. Hopefully that lays a very basic foundation of the two competing interests that advertising is all about balancing. You want to balance your reach, because reach costs money, with your efficiency that's gained through targeting more specifically. Basically, you're pulling those two levers if you're in the world of advertising and you have a marketing budget. Advertising today is way more complicated than what I've kind of gone over so far. But it lays a good foundation, and I think it's fascinating how the same concepts that can be applied to an ad that is dynamically generated when you visit a Facebook group or do a Google search, those same concepts are very portable to the way that you think about setting up a billboard, or even further back in history, just hanging a sign out in front of your shop. The idea of advertising is very, very fundamental to all of business, right? You need to raise awareness about your business. And back in the day, you did that by hanging a sign in front of your shop, and then your audience was the people walking down the street. And then some brilliant person was like, well, what if we hung this sign somewhere else and told people where our shop was? And essentially, that was the beginning of having more levers at your disposal in the world of advertising. And I think it's reasonably remarkable how far we've come to the point of the Googles and the Facebooks and the way that advertising works today, and how much more easily you can take the entire population of the world, subdivide it into specific pie slices, and then beam them specific advertisements that you know match up to their particular desires or interests. You can think about all of these platforms as essentially audience aggregators. They create an environment where many, many creators flock to create things, be it Facebook posts, photographs on Instagram, YouTube videos, and then audiences flock to those places looking to consume that content. And as those platforms create a larger and larger aggregate audience, their ability to sell that advertising space to potential customers grows proportional to the number of eyeballs that they essentially command. Where things become particularly fascinating to me is in the space that exists outside of the platform's ability to monetize itself. What I mean by that is YouTube plays ads. YouTube will go to an advertiser, receive a video ad, and then play it at the beginning of millions and millions of views on a particular YouTube video. But that's not the only way that monetization is happening on YouTube. There's also paid promotions that YouTubers are doing within their videos. If you watch any of the big YouTubers, you'll regularly see ad reads. An example of this is a big YouTuber reminding everyone how great NordVPN is at the end of their video in a prepared statement. These paid promotions are now becoming ever increasingly prolific within the realm of YouTube. And I think it's problematic for the platform because YouTube doesn't get a cut of that revenue. That is money paid directly to the YouTuber by the brand. And it's the dream of a lot of growing YouTubers to create those brand deals because of the much higher profit margins and the fact that YouTube isn't taking a cut. What I think is interesting, though, is there's also a psychological difference. If I'm a brand, I would rather have a well-known and specific YouTuber representing my brand than a smattering of random views on YouTube. And the psychology of it is really powerful because as you start to develop a trust and a relationship with a particular YouTuber, you begin to inherently trust their recommendations and believe the things that they say are good. So just to wrap things up, I think that it's worth talking for a moment about my relationship with advertising, because 7 years ago, I was that person who was like, who clicks advertisements? And I think that that's true of a lot of people. They don't understand how this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, given the fact that it feels like no one's clicking ads. But what I've come to realize is ads are incredibly powerful and also sometimes a bit insidious. And I want to give two specific examples on my way out the door. The first one is mattresses. I don't know if anyone here has tried buying a mattress in the last 5 years, but it's really, really difficult to get a straight answer. I think there was a New York Times article about this not too long ago, but almost all of the mattress review sites are now owned by large mattress conglomerates. And when you do a Google search looking to buy a mattress, it's very hard to find anyone that isn't being compensated by the mattress companies in order to provide reviews. And anytime money is changing hands, it's very hard to know where the truth lies. So even though I wasn't engaging in clicking ads, my perspective on the quality of a specific mattress was heavily impacted by money changing hands behind the scenes that I had no transparency or no insight into understanding at the time. And I think that that's one of the ways that ever increasingly in a world where everything is a Google search away, if you are the tech blog that reviewed the new iPhone, that is incredibly valuable if you are that first Google search result. And so as a result, it is becoming harder and harder to tease out truth from fiction in this world. But I think that sometimes understanding the advertising landscape can help a little bit in piecing together some semblance of information. Honestly, though, it didn't help me with the mattress thing. Eventually, I just took a shot in the dark and bought one of those pretty cool shipped to you tiny compressed mattresses that when you cut it open explodes into a full-size mattress. Absolutely magic stuff. The second example, though, is I bought a pocket knife maybe a year and a half ago. And the brand was Benchmade. And I had watched a handful of videos by some YouTubers who all around the same time had marveled at this new toy that they had. Really, really nice, high quality knife. And I don't think I realized at the time why that happened, right? The reason that all of those YouTubers got Benchmade knives around the same time is most likely, I don't have any evidence of this, but is most likely because Benchmade recognized the audience that they commanded and decided to give them a gift that was likely to show up or be talked about in the content that they created. Now, they had to create a good product, because if they created a terrible knife, then the YouTuber would have said awful things about them. But at the end of the day, it's another way in which something that we don't classically refer to as advertising can have a really material effect on our impression of a product. Because one thing that I've become very acutely aware of is when you develop a consumer creator relationship with a content creator on, say, YouTube, there's a certain bond of trust that is created there. You listen to what they say. Over time, you confirm that they tell the truth and are saying things that align well with your worldview. And then that trust is easily transferred to brands that they represent or mention. And that's incredibly powerful and can be used for good or can be used more insidiously. Okay, I know the transition was a little funky, but as you can see from the Frisbee behind me, right there, it's rotated. It rotates exactly one full rotation every week, which indicates to you, the paying attention viewing audience, that it's been exactly 3 days since I started recording the video. I was in the editing process and I realized that there was this one part that I hadn't really nailed describing. And so I wanted to go back and give a bit of an explanation. So what I wanted to talk about is something called native ads. And native ads sound pretty harmless, but they are essentially the notion or the idea of ads masquerading as actual content. And they're really, really popular right now. And I wanted to talk a bit about it because there's been a bit of a controversy. So I'll put a couple tweets, maybe something up here to get you up to speed, but to give you the high level overview, a channel called Hardware Unboxed does video card reviews and other types of reviews. And they had been sent free versions of NVIDIA's latest video cards. And the reviews that they didn't focus on the narrative that NVIDIA was trying to push. So I won't go into too much detail, but basically the cutting edge of computer graphics is something called ray tracing. And ray tracing is not particularly well implemented in video games right now. And so as a result, doing performance benchmarks surrounding ray tracing doesn't really apply to the average consumer. So Hardware Unboxed chose to do their review focusing more on the previous generation of technology, which is called rasterization instead. So what gets interesting is as you can see from the claims of Hardware Unboxed, NVIDIA kind of chastised them for not following the narrative that they wanted to. And the general reaction from the tech news space is one of shock and awe. Like, I can't believe NVIDIA would do this. I can't believe that they would kind of coerce a reviewer into reviewing something in the way that they wanted.
All right, we've gone full Inception. We have a cutaway inside of a cutaway inside of a video. I think that means that every hour that passes in this cutaway is only a second in the original video, but my math could be off there. Didn't want the video to go on any further without making it totally clear that I think that NVIDIA in this case are acting like scumbags and like bullies. I think the situation is very complicated and there are a lot of different interests at play that cause it to be a bit murky, and I'll delve into those a little bit further. But before we go any further, NVIDIA uncool.
I have a slightly different take, and it goes back to our discussion on advertising. The reason that NVIDIA is pushing a particular narrative is that the free cards that they send out to reviewers are not sent out by NVIDIA's charity department. they're sent out by the marketing team, right? The marketing team that owns the advertising budget is spending money in order to secure advertising for their products. And there is a massive portion of YouTube that is devoted to reviews of things, right? Be it reviews of new cars, graphics cards, pocket knives, mattresses. It doesn't matter. You can find reviews of basically anything. And within that space, there is an understanding that those channels function primarily on the ability to have at launch or even before launch the products that they're going to be reviewing so that they can create a video explaining the value of it, right? And these channels will be very clear about the fact that they don't provide pre-release versions of their videos to the companies of which they are reviewing, and they don't provide any editorial oversight and all of these different types of jargon that essentially boil down to our opinions are not for sale. And that's an admirable practice. But I think the problem is that it does not fully eliminate the quid pro quo of the industry. And so I wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge that this is one of the other dynamics at play. There's a huge swath of YouTube that is devoted to consumption, the buying of the best fill in the blank, the getting the best fill in the blank why items. And this part of the ecosystem is not that far away from ads. It's kind of analogous to this idea of native ads, right? If Google were to put a search result in the search result list that was not labeled ad and appeared to be what's called an organic search result, but was in fact an ad, and Google was getting compensated for it, there is an argument to be made that YouTubers that are accepting pre-release items from companies and collaborating with them are getting something of value. And I think the mistake that was made here was that the quid pro quo was too explicitly mentioned in the context of this. So I thought this was a really interesting and very in the moment, but related to what I was talking about thing. So I wanted to throw that out there. I think it's really interesting the way that advertising at times can masquerade as content, right? And you can make advertising entertaining, or you can collaborate with third parties that make content that is ostensibly an ad, right? And I think that that's a very challenging space to navigate because there are rules created by all the various governments. The US government, as an example, the FCC requires you to put things like #ad if you're doing an advertisement. But there's a very gray line there. At what point are you beholden to a particular company or brand to give them a review that is no longer completely unbiased? And I think that's just really complicated and a bit of a fraught topic to dig into. And this recent example really kind of put a very fine point on it from my perspective. So we're going to now rewind the week-long clock and get back to previous Alden, who's going to wrap things up. But it's something that I think as an adult in this ever-increasingly digital world, I need to be aware of because it can radically change my perception of brands or create brand loyalty that I didn't even realize I was thinking about. I hope this proved interesting. I tried to cover kind of a basis of what advertising is and then talk a little bit about my exploration and thinking on topics of advertising as someone who has some desire to create an audience here on YouTube, on Twitch, and a few other places. But with that, thank you so much for listening in. I appreciate it greatly. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. Not a potamus. Ponderous.